Hello class, and welcome to our presentation, The Problem of Free Will, an Introduction. So first we're going to address the question, what is free will? And then we'll talk about the philosophical problem of free will. We'll review some illustrations to help us to better understand this problem. And then we'll talk about the two major schools of thought that address this problem, determinism and libertarianism. So what is free will? So free will is the idea that decisions and actions are caused by an agent. And an agent is just a fancy term for a person. So put simply, according to the doctrine of free will, we are the cause of our decisions and actions, and thereby we are in control of our decisions and actions. And thus we can conclude that our decisions and actions are not caused by something else. So when we say that the will is free, it means that we are the cause of our decisions and actions, we're in control of them, and we're not being manipulated by some outside factor. Hence, if we are in control of our actions, that is, if we have free will, it means that we can be held morally responsible for our actions. Now, I think it's safe to say that most of us probably assume that we do have free will, that we are in control and we are kind of the cause of our own decisions and actions. But here's an issue. Are we really in control of our decisions? Are we really the cause of our actions? These are questions that are debated by philosophers in accordance with the problem that we call the problem of free will. And this is a metaphysical dilemma that asks the question, is free will possible? Indeed, according to some philosophers, as we shall discover, free will is an illusion. It doesn't really exist. Now, this is a fairly complicated issue. So in order to help us to kind of better understand this problem, let's kind of examine these questions with some illustrations. So are you ready? All right, let's go. So let's say I'm driving down the highway in a storm and a tree falls over and damages my car and I'm severely injured. Now, here's the question. Can the tree be held morally responsible for its actions? That is, can I sue the tree and say that it acted out of free will? What do you think? Well, this is just a guess, but I have a feeling that most of us would probably say no, that the tree cannot be held morally responsible for its actions. Okay, why? Because the tree does not have free will. It is not in control of its actions, but rather its actions are governed by the laws of nature, by cause and effect. So, the storm caused the wind, and then the wind caused the tree to fall over. And thereby, because the tree is governed by the laws of cause and effect, it couldn't have done otherwise. It was basically just being controlled by the laws of nature. All right, here's another illustration. Let's say that I go for a hike in the woods and I'm attacked by an angry mama bear because I got too close to her cubs, let's say. And let's say, or assume that I'm severely injured by this attack, God forbid. So again, we can ask the same question. Can the bear be held morally responsible for attacking me? Well, again, I have a feeling that most of us would probably say no. That once again, like the tree, the bear does not have free will. The bear is not in control of her actions, but rather the actions of the bear are governed by the laws of nature, that is by instinct. So the bear sees me getting too close to the cubs, and then instinct kicks right in, and then that basically causes the bear to attack me. And because the bear is controlled by the laws of nature, in this case by instinct, it couldn't have done otherwise. All right, our third illustration. Ooh, see this guy? He's going to burglarize your home. Okay. So, if this gentleman here were to burglarize your home and take your nice new laptop and your shiny coffee mug, can this man be held morally responsible for his actions? Well, once again, and this is just an assumption, but I have a feeling that most of us would probably say yes. Why? Because the man has free will, and we kind of assume that he's in control of his actions. And we can further assume that his actions are governed by, well, actually, what are his actions governed by? Like, how did he make that decision? And, like, actually, maybe he could he have done otherwise? I mean, hmm, actually, maybe this, uh, this act of decision making is actually more complicated than I think it is. That is, does this man really have free will? I mean, we kind of assume that human beings are part of the natural world, so perhaps like the tree and the bear, the man's actions are caused, and thereby the man cannot be held morally responsible for his actions. Hmm, let's think about this for a moment. All right, well, who would think of such a thing? Who would think that the man who's going to burglarize your home is just as helpless as trees and bears when it comes to their actions? Well, there is a philosophical school out there called Determinism that argues just that. That is, determinism is the philosophical position that argues that human beings do not have free will, but rather all human actions are governed by the laws of cause and effect, and therefore we are just like more sophisticated trees and bears. The way I like to put it to students is the following, is that according to determinists, human beings are just like nature's robots. We're just like conscious beings that are controlled by the laws of nature. Now, the man who's considered to be kind of like the father of modern determinism is the 18th century French philosopher Henri de Holbach. And he basically argued that human beings are nature's machines. And in his book System of Nature, he writes the following: man is a being physical. In whatever manner man is considered, he is connected to universal nature and submitted to the necessary and immutable laws she imposes on all the beings she contains. Man's life is a line that nature commands him to inscribe upon the surface of the earth without his ever being able to swerve from it. So in other words, human beings are physical beings, just like trees and bears, and therefore they're also kind of have to submit to the necessary and immutable laws of nature, and we cannot swerve from it for a moment. That is, de Holbach argues that there are what are called three conditions of experience that govern and therefore cause our decisions and actions. The first condition of experience are environmental conditions, that is, our upbringing, our values, the culture we live in, even the weather and the geography of like where we live. Second, mental emotional conditions, like your frame of mind, like whether you're angry or depressed, but also things like your perception of like your self-image, your perception of the world, your temperament, were you born with a temper or were you born as a more patient person, as well as your intelligence. And thirdly, physical conditions, that is your physical appearance, whether you're attractive or not, as well as your gender. So all of these things are the causes of the decisions we make every moment of the day of our lives. Let me give you an example. I love donuts, right? So let's say, after class, I'm driving down the road and I see a Dunkin' Donuts. Well, what would cause me to go in to the Dunkin' Donuts? Well, maybe I've had a hard day. Maybe I'm depressed. Maybe it's cold outside and I could really go for like a coffee and a donut. So in other words, my mental state, the weather outside, things like that are basically causing me to want a donut and then to pull in. Now, many of you would say, well, wait a minute, you have the ability to, pull in, parking spot and think about it and drive away, and that's true. But determinists basically argue that even if I were to change my mind, then I'm still being determined. So for example, let's say I pull in and then I have a memory of my mother saying, when I was overweight as a child, like, oh, you shouldn't eat those sorts of things. So then that memory would trigger another mental emotional condition, which would then change my mind and then I would leave. So in other words, regardless of whether I decide to pull into the Dunkin' Donuts or leave the Dunkin' Donuts, all of my decisions are being caused by these different conditions of experience. Now, Henri de Holbach was not the only person to accept this determinist argument. As we're going to find out, the defense attorney Clarence Darrow employed the determinist position to defend his clients Leopold and Loeb in the famous Leopold-Loeb trial. And the famous physicist Michio Kaku is also a determinist, and he writes the following. Newtonian determinism says that the universe is a clock, a gigantic clock that's been wound up in the beginning of time and has been ticking ever since according to Newton's laws of motion. So what you're going to eat 10 years from now of January 1st has already been fixed. It's already known using Newton's laws of motion. Einstein believed in that. Einstein was a determinist. So even the famous Michio Kaku argues that our actions are determined. So is this the end of the argument? Are human beings merely machines of nature? Is free will an illusion? Well, in the next presentation, we will discuss the position of libertarianism, which argues that some of our actions are free.